What is up, guys? So, as I record this and as you're watching it, today is February 28th. It is the last day of Black History Month. And I'm going to come clean about something here. So, I have been all month kind of facing this like internal pressure to do something special for Black History Month, to highlight specific stories or creators or even other people in the community. And honestly, time just got away from me, right? I had plans to review Cosmic Odyssey, featuring, John Stewart as probably his most prominent story. I had plans to review the first six issues of and then Static Rebirth of the Cool. So I had plans to spotlight all these series, but then things happened, milestone announcements happened, and they kind of got away in of the milestone tribute that I wanted to do as well. So it's like just a bunch of stuff has happened. But I wanted to talk to you guys for a few minutes about just Black History Month and what it means to me as a Black fan of comics and a Black man in general, right? So obviously, Black History Month, if you're not aware of the history, it started out as Negro History Week, founded by Carter G. Woodson way back in the times. And the month of February was selected. Originally, it was just because it coincided with Abraham Lincoln's birthday, and that's when Negro History Week was. Also, fun fact, NAACP was founded around the same time for similar reasons in 1909. But anyway, Black History Month has since expanded to the whole month, and it's just, a time to celebrate Black American contributions to United States history and beyond. We celebrate, the full African diaspora experience. So from all the way back before slavery, all the way up until now, and contributions to culture, arts, entertainment, media, politics, society in general, right? I am someone who has a degree in Black history. It's something that I studied extensively. In my past, I've actually been a president of an NAACP chapter. We've led voter registration drives and all sorts of, you know, activism. And the word activism has kind of taken on new meaning and new context in the last 3 to 5 years. But back when I was doing it, in college, that's what we were doing: marching, voter registration, political awareness, and we did mentorship. I started a tutoring program. So my point is that Black history is important to me. The plight of Black Americans is something that's important to me. And as it relates to comics, it's been an interesting journey. So I got into comics about 2 years ago, back in 2019. And I remember when I got into it and kind of dove in head first, there were a few different pockets of people that you would see, right? Obviously, there's just, the whole, the blurred, we would call it the blurred community, where people are like, repping their blackness and their nerdness as like a sort of badge of honor, right? There's people who were completely just anti diversity. And they've got their own names for their groups. And then there's what I felt were just people like me who were into comics, who happen to be Black, who don't hide Blackness, but who also aren't necessarily defined by it. And for me, being in comics was interesting because when you start looking up comics on YouTube and stuff like that, you find all of the opinions. And overwhelmingly, what I would find were opinions that seemed to be anti Black, like opinions that made me question whether or not I was welcome in the hobby, right? And that was never fun. So, a part of the reason I started this channel was not necessarily to offer a counter narrative or a counter perspective, but just to offer a natural perspective, my perspective on stories that I read, stories that I like, stories that I think other people should be or might be interested in, whether they're by characters of color or creators of color or not. Um, and obviously, stories featuring characters and creators of color are of particular interest to me for all of the reasons I stated above. So, anyway, when it came to Black History Month, I felt this pressure as one of few Black creators in comics on YouTube that I know of. It's like, oh man, I have to represent like all of Blackness and I have to put on for these stories and so on. And the reality is, I don't, right? And not because my Blackness is something to hide, but because I don't have to wait for a specific time of the year to be Black, right? If you're watching the channel, I'm sure you notice what my face looks like, you know? And that's not to be condescending or anything, but the point is to be Black, is something that I always am. I don't get to turn it on and off. There's no outfit that I put on to make me more or less Black. There's no way that I speak to make me more or less Black. And there's never going to be a time where Black stories are more or less interesting to me just because a date on the calendar changed. So, with that said, I've decided that I don't have to wait for Black History Month and I don't have to feel like I have to rush this content out. I'm going to keep doing what I do and I'm going to highlight stories that are important to me no matter when they come up, no matter when I read them. But for purposes of this video, I do want to give you some recommendations. If you are someone like me who has a particular interest in stories featuring Black characters, written by Black creators, or just offering a perspective that's different from, what we would call mainstream. So, I mean, there's a lot out there. So if you want to go with the big two, there's a bunch of stuff going on. Obviously, there's Far Sector by N.K. Jemisin, which introduced a new Green Lantern to the world. Really cool. If you're into sci-fi, I've been enjoying it. Hopefully it gets a hardcover collection soon. I think we're on issue 10 out of 12. But jump on that if you can find it at your local comic shop. Staying with DC Comics, Milestone Media is making a comeback. So a lot of people are familiar with the character Static from the cartoon Static Shock, but there's a whole universe around Static and many other characters, Icon, Rocket, Hardware. There's the Blood Syndicate, which is kind of like an amoral X-Men. There's Zombie. There's a bunch of books. There's Heroes books that came out. There's a bunch of titles from Milestone Media that are actually being put out digitally as we speak. So right now you can get issues 1 through 5 of Icon, Hardware, and Static. And later on in the month of March, you'll be able to get issues 1 and 2 of Blood Syndicate, and new issues of that will be coming out every week. And when I say new, I mean like the reprints. But along with those reprints, the Milestone universe has been relaunched as well. So you can get the Milestone Returns Zero one-shot, and that's available digitally right now. In April, we're getting a new Static series. I believe in June, we're getting a new Icon and Rocket series. And then in August, we're getting a new Hardware series. Those are all going to be digital first series, and they're going to follow with print later on. So if you want to support really cool stories that feature minority characters that, are not minority for the sake of being minority, but just for the sake of displaying the world as it really is and telling interesting stories, that's definitely an imprint to look out for. But yeah, that's those. In also in DC, on the main Green Lantern book, we've got Jeff Thorne starting his run in April. And he's going to be heavily featuring John Stewart in his run. So there you go, Black character and Black creator. Actually, all 3 of the books I just listed were Black characters with Black creators. On the Marvel side, Ta-Nehisi Coates is finishing up his run on Black Panther. It's going to end with issue 25, and issue 23 just came out last week as I record this. So check that out. Ta-Nehisi Coates has like a 9 trade paperback volume run on Black Panther. And there's been a lot of creators of color on Black Panther in the past. Christopher Priest has a great run. Reggie Hudlin has a great run, which introduced the marriage of Storm and T'Challa. So great things written by great people. And like I said, those are just with the big two. If you want to go out into indie comics, there are even more stories being told by creators of color, featuring characters of color. So we've got Killadelphia, which is a horror mystery series by Rodney Barnes. I've been particularly enjoying that series. There's Bitter Root, which is also horror, set during the Harlem Renaissance. That's a really cool series. There's Excellence, which is like magic and martial arts and all sorts of really cool stuff. The artwork in that series is amazing. I actually missed out on the single issues, but I just recently found out about the series because there is a Kickstarter that's live right now for the next 20 days or so to get the deluxe version of the hardcover, trading cards, posters, all sorts of stuff. I just backed it, and you should definitely do the same. If you're into history or or biographical type content, there's March, which is a 3-volume trilogy written by the late John Lewis. But yeah, it's an autobiographical comic series talking about, the struggle for civil rights, and particularly in Alabama, the Selma marches, Montgomery bus boycotts, all of those things. So those are just a few. There are many stories out there, like I said, by Black creators featuring Black characters, and there's no time to spotlight them all, right? And so, but yeah, so my commitment to myself is to make sure that I'm always spotlighting these stories. And these are just a few. There are so many stories by Black creators or featuring Black characters or just featuring stories that are important to people, right? And like I said, I know that with comics, there can certainly be a time. I mean, there's always been Black fans of comics. There's always been Black creators, even if they weren't getting the credit back then, right? So I never want people to feel like I did at one point, like, am I welcome in this hobby? Comics are for you too. So those are some stories that I recommend you checking out. And like I said, I'll be doing spotlights and reviews on any story that I come across that I find interesting. So stay tuned for that. If you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do so. I'm here not to be divisive, not to, argue with people, but because I like comics. And so I hope you saw something that's interesting to you. Right now, on Sunday, there's actually a live stream event going on called the Black Comics, excuse me, called the Black Comics Universe. So you should definitely check that out. They're spotlighting a bunch of creators of color. A lot of the names that I mentioned here are going to be speaking at that conference. So I'll put a link to it in the description of this video, along with links to Kickstarter and all sorts of stuff that I mentioned here. I hope you saw something that was interesting to you in this video. If not, that's cool. I always say you can buy what you like. Make sure you read what you buy. And be nice to others, because kindness makes the world go round. Peace.